Welcome to Straight Talk with Alyssa Thorne. And I have with me once again the wonderful Mary C. Kelly. And today's topic of discussion is going to be, we're going to talk about veterans and what they need to think about in order to grow and expand their business. What tools, what tips, what they need to do in order to expand their horizons when they're thinking about either starting a business or growing a business. So welcome, Mary C. Kelly.
Thank you, Carly. It's great to be back.
So actually what I would like to start with this time is because most people do not know your background, and I just always assume people know who Mary C. Kelly is and what she does and where she's been in her life, and everyone just goes, and I just go along, Mary Long, and you know, never go into who you are, and because I just know you and I love you. So I thought this time I would start and go, let Mary say who she is, and basically so people understand why you could talk about veterans in depth and how you have this knowledge. So why don't you share a little bit about your experience so people understand why you can have the breadth of knowledge that you have and how you can now talk about this at this length.
That makes sense. So for many of the veterans out there, we sometimes wonder when we get advice from people, do these people have any idea where I came from, what my life was like, and what do they understand what making this transition is? So thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. I did 21 years as a commissioned officer in the Navy. My older brother was a Marine helicopter pilot. He did over 20 years. His wife was in the Navy Reserves over 20 years. My husband was a Force Recon Marine from way back in Vietnam times. My sister did over 20 years in the Air Force, and her husband, after doing a few years on active duty, then went reserves, did 20 years. And my younger brother was active duty for 10 years as a pilot in the Navy too. So we have a lot of military in our family, and because of that, I can talk about the transition because I've done it, my older brother's done it, my sister's done it, and the spouses have done it too. So we're familiar with what it looks like on both sides. And thank you for letting me explain that, because other people sometimes look at this and say, well, what do you know about this? In fact, you know, how does this work? So a funny story, my older brother and I were both going through what we call TAP, Transition Assistance Program. And for TAP, I know it sounds crazy to civilians, but then after being in the military for so long, they send you to a 2 to 3 to 5 day program to learn how to be a civilian again, how to assimilate back into the civilian world. And I went through it about 2 years before I got out of the Navy. And then you can go back and sit through it again if you feel like you should do that. And then they have a time period. You have to do it within 90 days. And so there's all kinds of rules that mandate this, of course. So what was funny is my older brother and I were going through this program at relatively the same time, within about 6 months. And the person who taught my program in Maryland was the same person who taught his program in Philadelphia. And so we compared notes. And I said, well, this is the profile they came up with me. And he said, what is that? What do you think you're going to do with that? I said, I don't think that's going to work for me. And he goes, well, this is what they came up for me. I go, what do you think about that? He says, I don't think that's going to work for me either. And we both became entrepreneurs. He runs a music and sound system business now after being a helicopter pilot in the Marine Corps, and I run a business and leadership development company. So we have been through this, and what we found was many people try to either misalign our skills into something because of their bias. And this is the one thing I wanted to talk about specifically was sometimes when we're getting out of the military, we ask other people, okay, what'd you do, what'd you do, what'd you do? And they give us answers, but those answers are so heavily ingrained in their bias, what's ingrained in their head. So the people you talk to, if they went right from a job in the military to another defense job, they can't even fathom being an entrepreneur. And you know that, Carla. You know that people respond to questions with the bias that's in their head through the lens that they have.
Absolutely. And what I'm going to respond with what Mary is saying is that, first of all, we need to know what drives us, what our passions are. And obviously, you've learned certain skills when you've been on base, when you've been in the military, right? And the skills that you've developed there are definitely skills you're going to use on the outside. But now you need to do your own inner homework and find out what are your passions. And then once you find out what your inner passions are, what drives you passion-wise, what excites you, what wakes you up in the morning that you want to go and then help other people with. You can take the skills that you've developed, and then Mary will expound upon that, because me and her have this kind of really good rapport of going back and forth. You can then take those skills and find something that you can, like you said, is, start your own business and use the skills that you developed in the military to find them and refine them in a way that you can do something that you truly love, that you're passionate about, and find something that you can then run your business and use those skills to do something that you truly love that not necessarily is a military job. Does that make sense?
That's exactly right, Carly. In Chapter 5 of my book called 15 Ways to Grow Your Business in Every Economy, sometimes people say, well, I don't have the business yet. But it's a good starter point. I'm coming out, as you know, with a short ebook called A Checklist to Start Your Own Small Business. And as soon as I get back in town, it'll be finished by the middle of April. And I just need to get that done because there is a need for that. But Chapter 5 of 15 Ways to Grow Your Own Business in Every Economy is about your life resolutions. And I don't start with it because we sometimes forget about our life resolutions when we're thinking about business. But where I start with people is, what kind of life do you want? And if they say, I want lots and lots of time with my family and I want security, then entrepreneurship is frequently not for them. I had one lawyer who said, my family and my 2 twin boys are the most important thing in my life. I said, great, so that's your life resolutions. He said, great. I said, so what is it going to take for you to have a successful business practice? And he says, well, I would need to work about 60 hours a week and travel 10 days a month. I said, okay, do you want to do that? And he said, yes. I said, are you okay with being away from your family like that? 60 hours a week means 80 hours realistically away from home. And he says, oh, well, I'll spend time with my kids when they're older. I said, wait a second, those are 2 completely misaligned goals that you're saying, I want more time with my family and I want this insanely successful legal practice. In this case, you've got to get them both closer together, otherwise it's simply not going to work. One or the other is going to have to give, and you are going to be the one caught in the middle. So aligning your personal goals and your business goals with your life resolutions, I think, is really important. So then I ask people to write down, what is their business goal? If you had the perfect business, what would it look like to you? And that forces people to think about what kind of place they want to be in. And then I ask them, what kind of jobs do you specifically like doing? So you and I we like the interaction with people, and we like to get out there, and we love the marketing, and we love to write articles, and we love to really feel like we're helping people. And for some people, that's not what they want to do. So you have to align your business with what it is you really like doing. I had somebody else who said, I want to run a retail store. And I looked at him and I said, but you hate people. You can't be the face of a retail store if you really truly don't like being around people, because that's what makes you successful. So aligning not just your personality, but your real life goals with your business goals, I think, is important. And then I ask people to get specific and say, what are you going to accomplish for you this year in 2014? Are you going to stop smoking? Are you going to cut back on drinking? Are you going to exercise for 5 minutes a day? Are you going to remember to take your vitamins? I mean, whatever it is that you're going to commit to doing for you, will that align with your business? So that's the stuff we do in the beginning before we even start the actual checklist to starting a business. So getting down to actually starting a business, we want to figure out a couple things. First, what are you going to do to help people? How will you get paid to do it? Can you get paid to do it? And what problems are you solving? So remember, if we look at it from the human motivations, everybody wants 3 things. We want happiness, money, and sex. And we don't discuss the last one. We just deal with money and happiness, and we hope everything else takes care of itself. So when you're running a business or thinking about your own business, come up with a battle plan or a business plan. Same thing. I have on my website now, it's called a 5-minute business plan, because a lot of our people sit down to write a business plan and they get overwhelmed. Also on my website, which is productiveleaders.com, there is a fill-in-the-blank business plan for people who just want to be walked through the whole process. But the 5-minute business plan I came up with about a month ago because I saw that people thought they had a business plan, or they would tell me they had a business plan, and then when I would say, show it to me, they're like, it's all right here. That doesn't count. You need to have it written out and very clear what it is you actually do or intend to do. And once you have that started, then you can start implementing what it is you need to do. And you've been through this, Carly.
Oh my God, yeah, it is very true. A lot of people, and again, now a lot of people don't like the law of attraction or LOA, but the reality is, until you actually, you may have it up here, but until you actually speak it, until you actually write it, it's really hard to manifest something if it's all up there. Now, here's another funny, very interesting thing. A lot of people go, well, if I write it or if I speak it, someone's going to steal my idea. I love that one. But the reality is, you really need to have something, and you really have to have something written down. And don't forget, as you write it down, then you have it written down where you can actually expand upon those ideas. And then you have the outline, and the outline becomes, in essence, your roadmap upon which to expand upon. So you have to have something in writing. And it is really great to have it stored up there. However, I also want you to think of all the junk you have up there actually then has too much gunk up there. And the more you actually take out of there, gives your brain space to create more ideas to expand upon. So you want to actually take some stuff out of there and put it down in writing. But it's amazing how many people are afraid to write it down. It's almost like, I like to call it the saboteur. If I don't write it down, then it's almost a fear that if they write it down, then they're actually going to have to do something about it. So if they don't write it down, then they don't have to actualize it. You know what I mean?
I think you're onto something there. And I think people they're afraid of putting it down in writing because they think it's a commitment and then they can't ever change it. So I encourage people to look at their business plan at least once a year, kind of like you do with your financial plan, and get a snapshot picture and say, you know what, this is what I did last year, and now this is what I'm doing this year. Or if it changes, or if all of a sudden you find yourself moving from, say, SEO work to more one-on-one consulting work, that's going to change what your plan looks like. So pull it out and re-scribble it down and fix it. So again, this 5-minute business plan I'm using with pretty good success of late, because people can handle doing a business plan that only takes 5 minutes. And we all know a real business plan will take a day or two or a week, and that's with concerted effort and focus. And it might take that long if you're submitting the plan for financial support or for review or board of directors. But we have to start somewhere. And you're exactly right, to get it out of here and onto paper. I call it, the example I use is grazing in the refrigerator. How many times you come home and say, okay, I'm hungry, I need to make dinner. And you open up the refrigerator and there's food in there, and it's all kinds of food, but until you take it out and assemble it, it's not exactly edible. You have to take things out, mix things together, maybe cook something, but until you do that, it's not really a meal. You can't just, you have to get it out of the refrigerator, put it together, your refrigerator's your brain, and then put it together and assemble it and then do something about it. So I think we're right on that. The second thing I love to talk to people about is giving yourself a report card. Score.org has a terrific, I call it their report card, but across the top, they talk about doing a competitive analysis with you and your top competitors. And I think this is a really good thing to do for people who are thinking about starting out in the business. I had a friend who started a coffee shop in the same strip mall as a Starbucks. And I thought this was a bad idea. And I said, here's the problem. People know Starbucks. They know what they're getting for their money. There's a McDonald's across the street that sells coffee if they just need the quick dollar coffee. And you're putting up a mimic of Starbucks 4 doors away. This is not a good idea. You've got to do a little bit more research about your market and what it is you do. And if she had just done this SCORE competitive analysis, she would have realized that in every category, her competitor, which was Starbucks, was going to outpace her. They were going to get an A and she was going to get a D if she'd been honest with herself about product placement, notoriety, how well your marketing is working, advertising. There's no way she could compete with a Starbucks 4 doors down. And after 2 years, she finally closed her doors, and it was sad. So getting that market analysis is, I think, really important. In real estate, if you're going to sell a house, you get what's called the CMA, Competitive Market Analysis, and that lets you know what is going on everywhere else. And you have to do the same thing in business. And worse is when you put your business up, and then 2 or 3 months later, maybe a well-known competitor opens 4 doors down from you. And they certainly weren't worried about you when they first looked at that property a year or 2 or 3 years ago, and you didn't know that they had bid on the property that was attached to yours. So it's worth doing some initial homework. That said, sometimes we get so caught up into doing the homework that we don't take any real action to start our business. So I've seen people do this. They go, yeah, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on it. Well, if you're still working on it 10 years after you said you were going to do it, maybe you're not really doing it. Or maybe whatever business you thought you were going to do, it's just not really your passion, and it's not something you want to do. You don't want to do it badly enough. So putting it down on paper gives you not just a plan, like the business plan, but then giving yourself that report card and being honest with yourself. Can I compete in this environment? Am I better than my competitors? And if so, in what areas? Because those are the areas then that I need to direct my marketing and my advertising so that people will come to me instead of my closest competitor. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Now, there's two things here that I want to also distinguish upon. Because you're talking about brick and mortar, so let's distinguish a couple things. Mm-hmm. One of the things you brought up, I like to say, is analysis paralysis, which is when we get so caught up in the analysis of things, we actually paralyze ourselves. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, I think I want to distinguish a little bit, which I'd like you to address, is when you're talking about getting into all this analysis, I want to distinguish a little bit between a brick and mortar store. So that's when you might get a little bit more into doing like the score.org versus if you're an entrepreneur who someone might be working out of the home and you're doing a little bit of a different type of service, like more consulting, which is a little bit different than a brick and mortar. You might not be doing so much more analysis, which comes into score.org, comparing a brick and mortar establishment than if you're more into more of consulting services, and it's a business which is a little different than a brick and mortar. So can you address that? Because those are a little bit different things here. Because a brick and mortar does require a lot more research if you're doing a brick and mortar store than if you're doing entrepreneur services, which a lot of people nowadays are doing, and a lot more people running businesses out of their homes, which are involved in a lot more consulting services and that. Because and a lot of people are doing that more now because they don't want to get into brick and mortar type of situation.
Oh, and I think there's a huge need for people who are working as independent contractors out of their home. So much can be done through the internet, through home. So much work can be done from home that people should not be afraid at all to start a business, setting aside part of their home as their business space. So I'll just knock out the brick and mortar idea fast. So if you're going to do something like a restaurant, a bar, a retail store, cake decorating, and you want a storefront to do that, that's when you need the full-on business plan. You've got to apply for financing. You've got to apply for loans and grants unless you have somebody in your family who's willing to loan you a whole bunch of money. And that's a whole other thing. So you're going to want the real estate analysis. You're going to want external people coming in. And that startup is going to take a good long time to do it right. But the advantage that they have is once they're in existence, people driving by see them. They have a visible presence. If you're working from home, you've got to get smarter on marketing and advertising and online mechanisms than the brick and mortar people do, because that's what you're relying on to get business. In the 5-minute business plan, I have the phrase almost famous. What are you doing to let people know about your business, your product, and what you're doing right now? And not only that, but if I asked your spouse, your significant other, your kids, or your mom what you do, could they, in a sentence or two, tell me what you do in a way that I would understand it and possibly be compelled to buy your product or service? And the frightening answer of that, Carly, is no. Most people don't. Would you like to know why? Especially in the military community. We are taught not to brag. We are taught to be modest because in the military, your boss is supposed to recognize the good work that you do, and they're supposed to write up your performance evaluations. They're supposed to write you up for medals. They're supposed to help you get promoted. In the civilian world, and this is a big difference, if you don't toot your own horn, nobody else is going to.
Very true. I also want to add one other thing that because I've been around a lot of military family, and I've also been around a lot of CIA, FBI, whatever. We were also not allowed to say what our partners did because of confidentiality. So that was a whole nother issue. So, you know, yeah, and I understand.
And this is a problem when military people transition into the civilian world. You have to write out on a note card, this is what Daddy does now. This is what Mommy does now. So before, Daddy would go, well, where's Daddy? Daddy's out at sea. Okay, well, now what does Daddy do? I don't know. Daddy just leaves the house. The funniest comment was when I asked one of my nieces, and well, I should change the names to protect the guilty, but one of my nieces, I said, "Where's Mommy?" And Mommy was meeting people for a meeting for work, but the little child says, "Well, Mommy's out drinking again," and it made it sound like that was what she was doing for a job. So make it clear to the people around you, including your friends. And when we're talking about our friends, one of the best questions I love is when someone looks at me and says, "Who is your perfect client or customer?" And then I get to say, my perfect client or customer is someone who is in the financial world, banking, insurance, real estate, lawyers, anybody who owns their own private practice, private business, and who has to hustle for a living in order to make a living. Something like that. But I struggled with that for a long time because I didn't want to give people that information because I was afraid they might be looking at me like I was trying to toot my own horn. And so that's one of the points I make in this book is all about referrals. There's a whole chapter on referrals. And you and I both live off of referrals, don't we?
Absolutely. Our tribe, we live off of our tribe. Our tribe is constantly referring us other people and that's the thing. I would much rather get a client from Mary than I would from a stranger because I know if Mary refers me somebody, it's someone that Mary values and Mary knows, then if I get someone from a perfect stranger, I don't know the stranger. So, you know, the value of tribe, the value of referrals is, to me, it's just so much more valuable. I know it's going to be an easier client from someone, you know, to me it's going to be an easier client from someone that I know, even if it's not someone I directly know, but it's from the tribe, then it's from someone that comes from the yellow pages. It's going to be an easier client if it's coming from the tribe.
Oh, for sure. And not only that, but when someone gives me a referral, I care for that referral. I cultivate it. I follow up. I pay more attention to that referral because I don't want to let Carly down. I want to make sure that if she says, work with my friend, that I want to take great care of that friend. So managing referrals, and again, this is something in the military that we may not be very used to, have a system on how to ask for referrals, how to manage the referrals that you get, and how to give good referrals. So I have to share this with you, Carly. Yesterday, a friend of mine at a function walks up with an envelope and says, "This is for you, open it later." Okay, so when I got home last night, it was in the car, and I opened it up, and it was a card that said, "Thanks for being my friend," with a gift certificate inside that said, "I appreciate your referral." And I had just given them a warm lead on something. It wasn't a done deal yet, and she preempted the whole contract issue. She says, "You know what? You've given me so many referrals, I just want to say thank you." And it was a nice gift certificate. So when someone gives you a referral and you say thank you in a nice way, guess what? Because of that yesterday, not because she gave me the gift certificate, but just because she was grateful for it, it makes me want to refer her more. So if you're getting referrals and you're not saying thank you, you're not doing something about it, you absolutely have to do that. That's part of managing the referrals. And the second part of that is making sure you ask for referrals. If you're if your tribe is out there and you're not asking them for referrals, then you're making their clients' lives more difficult, because a lot of us are just trying to find the right people to do business with. And my friends know there's a certain type of person I want to do business with. I want to do business with people who are fun and smart and honest and conscientious and thorough, and I have, it's kind of this list of criteria, like you and like most of our military community. So they know the kind of person I want to be working with, and you know the kind of person you want to be working with. So, and we've chatted about this before. And so if we know what we're looking for our friends, we keep an eye out for those people to make sure that we're referring the right people to the right people. And that helps both of them find the right people to do business with, helping both of them. And you've seen this.
No, absolutely. It makes a big difference when you're doing, and from both sides. It makes a big difference when you yourself are working with people you want to work with, and it makes a big difference when you're referring people to people you want to refer to. Mm-hmm. You know, I know that if I refer someone to Mary Kelly, I know the type of service they're going to get, and I know if I'm taking care of a client that I want to be working with, I know I'm going to be a lot happier working with that type of client. So it's a two-way situation. And by the way, since we are also doing this as a podcast, please let everyone know where they can find your wonderful resources and where they can find you.
Oh, thank you. My website is productiveleaders.com. And if you go to productiveleaders.com, there's a pretty good giveaway if you sign up for the newsletter right now, and it will be there for a little while. But I have a whole page devoted to free resources for entrepreneurs. There's a whole list of things they can do. There is a profit and loss statement just to get started. There's a monthly budget for people to get started, and it's all interactive. None of it stays on my server. You go in, you click on it, you download it to your computer. It is yours. It is yours, just yours. You share it with only people you know. I know there's some programs out there that they say, well, we're interactive and use our stuff on the cloud. And that we don't store anybody's financial information. That's not what we do. And there's also the fill-in-the-blank business plan. There is also the productivity sheet. So if you're trying to figure out what you do well, the productivity sheet will help you define that. The productivity sheet shows follow-up, things to do today, calls I need to make, appointments I have, what my accomplishments were, and what my goals, say, for the week are. And Carly, when I have worked with this for sales teams, if I can get a sales team or a business owner to use that productivity sheet every single day for 90 days, and that's Saturdays and Sundays and everything. We all work. If you're an entrepreneur, you're working every day of the week, every weekend, all the time, and you're always thinking about your business anyway. So having a place to jot down those ideas, oh gosh, I have to call Carly. Oh gosh, I have to call Frank. That makes it real, but it also lets you know what you did. It also lets you know what you didn't do. So let's say I wanted to make an infographic, and I put on Monday, make infographic for productivity, and I didn't do it on Monday, and it's still there on Tuesday. And the way I work it is you can't just cross it off if you haven't done it. You can either move it to a new page, but you have to move it to the next day's page. You can't go, Monday to Friday. It doesn't work like that. Or you find somebody else to do it. And after about 2 weeks of not making the infographic, because I thought I'd learned to do infographics, I wanted to be clever like you, guess what? I didn't do it. And so I thought, you know what? This is clearly not a skill set that I have, and maybe it's time to outsource. So as Brian Tracy said, if you want to make $50 an hour, you have to stop doing the work that you can outsource for $8 an hour. Now, for me, it was taking me about 6 hours to think about this infographic when I know I could hire somebody who could do it much faster in about 10 minutes. So you have to look at that and say, okay, identify the things that you're not good at. And on the 5-minute business plan, I call it climbing the mountain. Where are you going to ask for help? What things are you bad at that you should not be doing because they take up too much time, you don't have the skill set, or you're simply not good at it, it's not fun for you, you need to outsource it.
Mary and I go back and forth about these things. Anyways, we are coming to the close of our time. So, Mary, what are some wonderful golden nuggets you'd like to leave the audience with.
First off, identify your life resolutions, identify your top business goals, identify your personal goals, have a system for management of your referrals, make sure you know how to ask as well as give, clarify your business plan, either with a short version or the longer version if you need to, and make sure when you do this that you are adopting the Olympian traits that we know you have and the organizational skills that you have, and apply it toward being wildly successful.
And as usual, I love having Marisa Kelly on the show, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. So for tonight, you've been with your host, Alyssa Thorne, and you can find me at carlylyssathorne.com. And as usual, I love bringing you valuable content. I will be putting together an entire page with all of Marisa Kelly's resources where you can find all her wonderful books, as well as her website with all her wonderful resources at productiveleaders.com. I did say that correctly, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, just want to double check. And I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and I look forward to seeing you guys all next week. Enjoy.